Call the meeting to order. This is the Board of Selectmen meeting. Welcome, everyone. We've tried to hold it in a place where we could accommodate everybody who might come in. We had no idea how many people exactly might show up, but I'm glad that we had it here. It gives our visitors an opportunity to see our grand hall once again. I want to first welcome our guests. We have guests from Foxwoods, many of them, some from the local area, some from Connecticut or Las Vegas, depending on when. And we also have our guests here from Chicago. So I don't know if I've left anyone out, but we certainly want to welcome them to Milford again. You know, I first, I know that sun is tough. I first want to clear the air with something. You know, we're into negotiations, and no matter how I might feel about casino personally, it's been my role as chair, I think, to further the negotiations as much as possible and to best protect and articulate the positions of the taxpayers. I was a little troubled last week when I saw what I thought was, or heard what I thought was personal attack on a radio where I was personally singled out by the Chief Development Officer of Foxwoods. Last I heard, that Chief Development Officer does not have a residence in Milford and therefore is not represented by me. In the same way, I'd ask that Foxwoods try to manage and keep the personal attacks down in the same way that I asked that the letters stop from that same person and individual. You know, quotes from Ted Kennedy aside, Ted Kennedy knew what he stood for. He stood for the people. He stood for people that didn't have as much. He stood for feeding the poor. He stood for making sure they had health care, but I don't know that he ever called a casino progress. The Chief Development Officer is entitled to his opinion, but I just ask that it not be personal in nature. And I'm hoping that it's not representative of the Foxwoods contingent. I'd like to move on from that. And what I'd like to first do is allow Mr. Butera and his contingent an opportunity to speak, let us know a little bit about what's changed. Anybody following the newspaper is obviously aware that some things have changed. And Mr. Butera and his organization is here to tell us about those changes and why those changes have been incorporated. Thank you. Wherever you like, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. That'll be fine.
All right. How's Hello?
It is
Hello?
working. It's just lower.
Okay.
Lower volume.
How's everybody doing today? Good. Great day. One of the things that, you know, we've come to wonderful place Milford is. You know, I can't hear you?
You either have to hold it very close.
Try and turn this way. Is that better?
Much better.
Okay, great. So, you know, I just want to say that Milford is truly a wonderful town. It's been a real joy to be here throughout this process, getting to know the people and the community. We've learned a lot about Milford in this process, and we think that we, you know, can work with all of you, continue to work with all of you, you know, to come up with something that we're all very proud of and has a great impact on all of us. I've really gotten, you know, well beyond what I thought I would in terms of my desire and interest in this process because of that, you know, and some of the changes that you're going to see are things that we've come up with, not so much to help the project, but to help the town of Milford, because it would be our dream to have a project that is world-renowned and have a community, a host community in Milford that can take credit for it, because I will say that I think the people of this town are truly humble. They have great values, values that you don't often see in today's society. It's no wonder to me why this town doesn't have the problems of other towns and is in great financial shape. I'd like to give my humblest gratitude and respect to the Board of Selectmen, Chairman Buckley, Mr. Selectman Bartholomew, Mr. Selectman Murray, also Jerry Moody, and all of the team. I will say that you have done a great job in selecting your leadership for this town, because they've done a tremendous job. I respect all of them tremendously, and I look forward to continue to working with them. Mr. Chairman, I will offer my sincerest apologies for the remarks of the Chief Development Officer. Those are entirely inappropriate. I am leading this charge, so obviously what's said by my team is my responsibility. I can assure you that it was, hopefully it was misquoted, but if it wasn't, it will never happen again. If you happen to hear my remarks on the radio, and I was actually in Las Vegas with my family, so I got up at 5 in the morning to do them, I was actually very praiseful of you and your team and their efforts, and I truly believe that. I think that you've done a great job, not only representing your community and helping them come up with a great outcome, but in helping us create a program and a property that is much better than it would have been if not for the challenges that you put before us. So I'm very respectful of your efforts, your team's efforts, and the board.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, and thank you for your apology. It's accepted, and for what it's worth, you've always been a gentleman throughout this process, and I've appreciated your participation and involvement.
Thank you. Well, this has truly been, a tremendous process. I'm very proud of my team and what they've done in some very limited time. I think we've all worked feverishly since the first time we got here. I felt a little naked, I think, my first meeting, if you remember that one. And from where we started to where we've gotten has been tremendous, but it has not been without a lot of really hard and intelligent work. There are a lot of people that can work hard, but sometimes you don't get something done. Like if someone asked me to go out and change their fan belt tonight, I could probably work my butt off for about 24 hours and not get anywhere. So we had the great fortune of having people that not only respected hard work, put most of their personal interests aside for the period that we worked, and helped us come up with this great solution. And obviously, we're very grateful to the town for giving us the opportunity to do this. I think that, as we've talked about, we've come up with a program and an amount and a body of work that no other applicant in this process has come up with. If you read the host community agreements for the other applicants, they sort of have placeholders, just sort of on mitigation items that just say the developer will pay for the mitigation. Doesn't really get into how they'll do that. Whereas in our case, we have extensive research that's been plowed over by 2 sets of advisors with all the major issues: traffic, water, sewage, security, environmental considerations, you name it. We've done a lot of work that's typically done much later in the process on the front end. And I think as we sit here today, we have what I will call the most visible project of any of the applicants. And by visible, I mean we can see it. We know it will happen. We know that our facility can be built in the way that we describe it being built, because we've done the amount of research to prove that. Whereas I think a lot of other applicants are going to sort of figure that out along the way and are likely to have some changes. So I think in terms of being comfortable that what you see before you can actually come to fruition, I think in our case we have something that no other applicant has, and you can sit there with a great deal of comfort and know that what we say we're going to build is actually going to happen. The changes that we're going to describe with regard to the program are the result of very intense negotiations with Mr. Moody and his advisors on behalf of the town. As you know, in a negotiation, there's always give and take on both sides. I always say, you have a good deal when both sides kind of feel like they lost something. And that also leads to something that's sustainable. So when you have a relationship where one side dominates the other, it might feel good for that one side that's dominating, but it's not sustainable. It won't last. Ultimately, there'll be a breakup. you know, a bankruptcy and personal life, a divorce, whatever it is. You always have to have something where it's symbiotic and both sides are working together. And I will say that because of the quality of the advisors on the town's behalf and the quality of the advisors on our behalf, the developer's behalf, we were able to come up with something that made sense for both sides. We heard the chairman's call with regard to economics in terms of wanting something that was similar to the other projects, Everett and Boston. So we said, as we've always said, because it's an interactive process, how can we make that happen? You know, is it possible for us to give the town what it's looking for and still have a project that's economically viable, still have a project that can be financed, you know, on Wall Street, that investors would be enticed by, that again would be sustainable over a long period of time, that wouldn't have a financial problem down the road. And fortunately, and there's always a degree of luck in everything. I always said I'd rather be lucky than skillful. But fortunately, we were able to make what I think are some fairly modest adjustments to our program, which created more economics, which allowed us to return more money to the community. So really, it was what I would call, you know, a win-win. Because if we get approval here in Milford, don't forget, we got to face, you know, the Massachusetts process. And, you know, make no mistake about it, we're up against, you know, some real stiff competition. I've worked in the gaming industry my whole life. You know, Mr. Wynn has been a leader in this business since I can remember. And clearly he's a very, you know, strong developer, and he's very good at what he does. The Suffolk Downs proposal has been around for a long time. At one point it was considered, you know, a lock to get the license. There wasn't going to be any competition. But, you know, they're involved with Harrah's Resorts, which is another strong company. So the competition is good. But we at Foxwoods have a little bit of an advantage. It's called the home court advantage. You know, there are some teams that play well at home. Used to be the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving, but I think that stopped about 5 years ago. But there are some teams that play very well at home. And for us, even though these are great competitors, this isn't their hometown. This is our hometown. Our whole team comes from this area. We understand what this area wants. At Foxwoods, 40% of our customer base, our 3 million person database, comes from southeastern Massachusetts. You know, we understand what Massachusetts is all about. Very different place. You know, because I was CEO of another company called Tropicana, I spent, you know, 5 years of my life, my home is still there, which is what Mr. Buckley referred to. But I spent 5 years of my life in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is very influenced by Southern California. And if you've ever been to California, people just have different, you know, likes and things that they're interested in than they do here in the Northeast. The architecture is different. I think when I moved out there with my wife, and she comes from a place called Northport, Long Island, which is a little seafaring town, and we had a nice little Victorian home on the water. When I said we're moving to Vegas, that was an interesting process. She was not excited. And, you know, I think we looked at like 100 homes trying to find anything that reminded us of back east, and just wasn't happening. So it's a very different place, you know, and because we've lived it, we're part of it, we think we understand it better than those two other competitors. So I think we have an unbelievably great opportunity to get out there and win this license. And I think that the process that your team has put us through and the feedback that you've given us has really helped us come up with something that puts us in great shape to do that. So, you know, I'm very appreciative again to this town for getting us there. So basically what we've done is, as you may recall, we've always talked about phase 1 and phase 2 in our project. What we did is we took certain elements of phase 2 and we incorporated them into phase 1. Which I think is good in a couple of regards. One, it allowed us to basically beef up the project a little bit, again, to get more economics, so we could get more economics back to the city. But it didn't change the look or the feel of the place. We haven't changed the footprint. I mean, we're going to add about 150 rooms, and all that really involves is adding another 30 feet on what were already fairly low-rise towers. And then we're going to add a little bit more square footage on our gaming floor and our food and beverage and our entertainment facilities, but nothing that really impacts, you know, the coverage, what I'll call the coverage of the site. So we'll still have, 20% of the building occupying the land and the other 80%, with these great natural spaces, which we're all very excited about. There was actually an article in the Boston Globe either on Sunday or Monday talking about how there's this whole big return to forestry. And I was thinking, boy, that's a great timing for that article, because that's kind of what our project emphasizes, is that we have this facility, but we also have, these lands which we can create these great natural spaces for. And not, again, there'll be nothing else like that, because every other project is sort of urban, high-rise tower. So, we've done that. We've added, about 100,000 square feet to our gaming facility. We've added square footage to our meeting spaces, our food and beverage, and as I mentioned, another 150 rooms. But when you look at the design, really you won't notice these changes, which, we're all very excited about. But that does, and again, the project doesn't get any closer to any of the homes. So, again, those buffer zones, we've preserved. The real exciting thing about what we've done is now, because of those changes and because of the economic impact, we can actually increase what we're giving to the community. So what we're talking about now is, for example, an upfront payment of $32 million to the town of Milford, and then annual payments of right around $31 million a year, which is very comparable to the other two applicants on an aggregate basis. But when you look at it on a per capita basis, we blow them away. I mean, what we're talking about is almost $1,200 a citizen, here in Milford, as opposed to, I think, Everett, which is something like $600 a citizen, under $600 a citizen. In Boston, it's like $50 a citizen. So we've far and away exceeded on a per capita basis the amount of economics that we're returning to the city. But in our design, we've preserved all the wonderful things about New England architecture. Again, we went for elegance, not opulence. Elegance, not opulence. Subtle, elegant, grand resort, something that we can all feel very proud of. If you're not a gamer, a place that you could go and have dinner with your family, or have a drink with your wife, or enjoy a show or an entertainment facility, or just walk through, again, if it's a nice day like today, some of the natural spaces. This is not brass and glass. I worked for Donald Trump for 5 years. If it wasn't brass, glass, a black rug, red, he didn't want to see it, This is very, very, very different. This is something that's absolutely elegant. I would put it on par with any hotel, in the country, if not the world. Again, there's nothing in the world that calls itself a casino that will look like this. So we're very excited about that. We talked a lot about the open spaces. Sustainability. Sustainability is very, very important, in today's environment. So what we've done is, we've spent the time and the money to emphasize low-impact development. We're going to have sustainable building strategies. We're going to have over 50% of our roofs will be green roofs, covered with ivies and grasses and natural things, which will be good. We'll have LED lighting. We'll also, have great systems for wastewater treatment, and so that we're not wasting any water. I know water is obviously a big issue here, and with the help of Sean Reardon and Tetra Tech and the advisors from the town, we've come up with some great solutions there. Public access. I know it's tough getting public access to Milford, so we're going to be giving money to the MWRTA so that they can provide more service to Milford. Obviously, we want that as part of our facility, but it'll also have other stops throughout the town, which, we think is good. We're going to be returning, a fair amount of money to the school system, which is important. We want to make sure that this town continues to have a great school system and everyone is well educated. That's important to us because we view that as our future workforce. So the smarter the people of the town, the better the recruits that we'll have for our facility and for all the businesses throughout Milford. And obviously that helps on the financial side because, everybody will, hopefully be well educated and they'll go out and get jobs and be productive members of the society, which will help, Milford maintain its great financial status, for a long time. We've done a lot of work, and I'm very proud of the things that we've done with the police and fire department here. We're obviously going to be providing money for them to have the resources they need to I think, have world-class operations. I will tell you that you're very fortunate in the sense that you have excellent leadership in both of those departments, and I think if we're able to give them the resources that they're asking for, which we will do, I actually think that the fire department and the police department here in Milford will set the standard for the state. I really see that type of talent in both of those operations, and I think, again, with some resources, they're going to continue to do great things. We talked a lot about jobs, throughout this process. Now with the new program, we're probably looking at 3,500 construction jobs, probably 3,000 jobs going forward operationally. Obviously, we're going to try and get as many people right here from the town involved in that. So wonderful opportunity. And again, what we've always talked about in a casino is, not only are these jobs, but unlike a factory or some other facility where the jobs are kind of limited in their scope, we have, I think over 150 different job descriptions, in a casino. You have gaming operations, hotel operations, food and beverage operations, entertainment operations. We have people that, engineering, that run the building, plumbers, carpenters, painters, you name it. There's just executives, financial people. There's just a whirlwind of the types of jobs at a casino, and the breadth of opportunity is pretty astounding. So, we're very, very proud of what we've come up with. We've been pushed in a good way. I always say, sometimes you're going to work harder, but it's going to feel better. And I think that's how we feel right now. Again, I think looking at our competition and looking at what we've been able to come up with, I feel very good that we're going to go in there and, with your help, win this license and do something really great for this community, the community that is so deserving of this type of facility. So with that, I'll conclude my opening remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Butera. Appreciate it. Next, what I'd like to do is go to our council and have them outline, in general terms, some of the more significant changes. And I know people are going to feel differently about what's significant and what's minor, but we'll ask council to go over the high points. And
start, if I may. This would be better, sure.
Can you reach it?
Thank you. Again, I'll start with some of the high points, and then Sid and Kim can jump in as they see fit. There's a lot to the agreement and the exhibits, as you know. An amazing amount of work has gone into it, and there's a lot of detail in there that I could take on a very, very long time going over. But there's some high points, and some of which Mr. Butera has mentioned. And, of course, on the economics, there's the $25 million, which is now estimated to be the amount of tax revenue that would come in on an annual basis were this ever built. And this is somewhere down the road, obviously. This would be presuming the permitting process, the licensing, construction. So assumptions are made, and the assessors have reviewed it, or the assessor's office has reviewed it. And the estimate is about $25 million for tax revenue. Again, unlike others, there's no pilot agreement. They're going to pay full real estate and personal property taxes, however high or however low they may be. So another very, very important part of this agreement that's in here, and it's been a key from your board's perspective from the beginning, is having a guarantee in there, not only that they'll pay their taxes, but that there'll be a minimum. So if for any reason, because of changes in tax rates, between changes in valuation, it ever drops below that number, we'll get that number. And if you remember on the prior iteration, we were talking $19 million estimate with an $18 million guarantee. Now the estimate realistically is $25 million, and the guarantee that's going to be in the agreement is also going to be $25 million. And that's very important protection, because that's also what will allow us, if down the road, when the money comes in, whether it's 4 or 5 or 6 years from now, when it begins to come in, town officials at that time in town meeting can make a decision to take as much of that additional revenue as they see fit and adjust tax rates in such a fashion to basically give money back to the homeowners, to the businesses, reduce taxes without at the same time reducing the burden of what will be the largest taxpayer in town, the casino. So that's the manner in which we've done this, and I think it'll work. It's similar, but on a much larger scale to what we did with the power plant. So that was a key provision, and that is in there. And again, the guarantee is the same as the estimated taxes, $25 million. Obviously, if things change and the evaluation 6 years from now is $30 million, great, we'll get $30 million. If we use funds in such a fashion that the tax bill drops to $20 million, we'll get $25 million, which will allow us to continue forward, obviously. And as Mr. Butera mentioned, there's the $32 million in upfront impact payments. There's a lot of components to that. Police were mentioned, fire, but also one part of this too is there's a $22,500,000 is designated as part of the $32 million as a fund to under language developed in the agreement to protect the value of homeowners in the neighborhood. The neighborhood being defined as north of 109, east of 495, and east of what would be the outside line of the business property district, all up to the Holliston line. So all of that entire neighborhood would have the benefit of this protection, which we have in there for a period of, it would be running from the time of licensing by the Gaming Commission, presuming they granted a license, and then for a period of 5 years, after operation. So it might end up being, in that sense, a period of 7 or 8 years. This protection would be there. And the guarantee would be basically that on any arm's length sale of the properties, the first sale and only the first sale, arm's length sale of the properties during this period of time, there'd be a guarantee of, first and foremost, they would get the most recent assessed valuation. So if the sale was taking place in July of 2016, they would get the guarantee of the assessed valuation on January 1st of that prior year, plus an additional amount based upon the median increase across town for that class of property for the prior year. Today, Priscilla ran that, today for the prior year for a single family, that would be an additional 7%. So if this were done today, I'd be guaranteed my assessed valuation plus 7%. So that's the system we set up, and we put that in there to extend again from the time, it'll be the time of licensing by the Gaming Commission, and then for a period of 5 years past the opening of operations. So that's a very important part of this. Again, that's part of the $32 million, but that provides some protection for the neighbors. There's additional economic aspects of this, including a provision whereby when and if gross gaming revenues exceed $500 million, there's an additional 2% of gross revenues that would come into the town. Right now, it's estimated that that could cause the annual payments of taxes and everything else to be between $31 up to even $35 million if they actually hit that target and exceed it. So that's another benefit going forward. There's provisions that we've put in here based on discussion for funding for the school department based on the number of students. Originally, it had a flat, if you remember, I think it was $120,000 or something like that, that was based upon an estimated number of students. But now the language is in there in such a fashion that they will actually pay based upon the number of students, which will be easy to verify based on the information that will be provided, checked with our school department. We will know how many additional students come as a result of employment. If they're lower than the threshold of about 20, that's fine, and the payments won't be that great. But if, in fact, the fears are realized and they exceed that by a substantial number, the payments will be even greater under the formula that'll be in here. So also with what's referred to as the lost state aid, there's a provision in here on a formula on an annual basis that will be looked at that will provide the school department an amount of money based upon a calculation that will show how much state aid is lost for that particular year with the coming of the casino. So those are some good financial aspects to this that a lot of work went into. Infrastructure also, very important. In terms of the things like the collector-distributor road, important requirement in here that it's got to be designed, approved, and a contract actually has to be issued for construction of that road before a building permit can issue for the project. And that project, the collector-distributor road, has to be completed before there's going to be occupancy and operations at the site. So that's been something that your board has insisted upon, and that's in here with all the strength we need. Similarly with the sewer and the water. Sewer has to be fully permitted before they get a building permit, has to be fully completed and operational before occupancy and operations. So also with the water, they've got the water work that they have to do. and that has to be fully operational, and they have to have demonstrated the provision of the 135% of additional capacity before they're operating there. So those protections are in there, I think, very solid. And even in the water, there's provision in here for annual reviews to make sure that it's worked out, and an ability for us to force other improvements if, in fact, what has been done didn't pan out to provide the 135% or better for water. Sound barriers have been talked about, and we have provision in here whereby sound barriers can only be done with the approval of the Federal Highway and the State Department of Transportation. Foxwoods can't put them up just because they want to. We met with the Federal Highway Administration and the Department of Transportation, and there are certain standards that have to be met. But part of the agreement is that Foxwoods will have to do all the work that's necessary to determine whether or not those standards can be met and submit application for approval of construction of sound barriers. And if, in fact, the standards are met and the approval is given, Foxwoods is then bound to construct those sound barriers as part of the project. So that's, again, another, I think, important provision. In terms of employment, as you heard Mr. Butera indicate, there's, I think the estimate now on construction jobs is up around 3,000 and 3,500 permanent jobs. There is that language which we talked about previously, which is in there with what we think is as much strength as we can get under the strictures of the Constitution, requiring best efforts for hiring Milford residents and systems in there for making efforts to recruit Milford residents. There's also a requirement for best efforts in terms of hiring 95% of all employees from within a 50-mile radius, actually, of this building is the way it's measured. So the goal is to try to, obviously their goal, I think, and it's consistent with our goals, is to try to staff this with people that are in the area who, frankly, aren't going to move to Milford. That's part of the goal behind that. Another very important provision is an absolute requirement in here in full agreement from Foxwoods that they're going to be part of the federal ICE image program, the same as the town is, which I think goes about as far as we can go in terms of guaranteeing that staffing isn't going to be done with people who aren't in this country illegally. And based on conversations we had in the past, there's further provisions in there for handicapped accessibility, for gaming tables and such. So those are what I view as some of the highlights of the package that you have before you. A lot of that came through some very intensive negotiations over this past Labor Day weekend, which went on and on. So I don't know, Sid, if you have any you'd want to add to that in terms of highlights.
Thank you, Jerry. The only thing I would add is when Scott and his team came to us and said that they wanted to change the program, mindful of what the selectmen had demanded, which is all the reports had to cover phase 1, phase 2, or however it was going to be done, we immediately contacted each of the consultants, walked them through verbally initially what the new program was: 150 hotel rooms, 50,000 square feet of additional gaming, 40 of this, that, and the other thing, and asked them, was this a non-starter or would it work? They indicated verbally that based on what I had told them, they thought that the reports covered it, but they wanted to see the actual program. I think it was 2 days later, we got the program put together, rough design, which was then refined a little bit later and sent out again. Contacted each of the consultants and received confirming emails, letters, et cetera, which were reflected in the opinion that we delivered earlier today, that each report covered phase 1 and phase 2 initially. Number 2, that this new program is well within the phase 1 and 2 review. So we talked to traffic. Traffic said there's actually less traffic than they planned for because this is a one-phase deal. It's not going to be quite as large. We talked to water and sewer. They're both comfortable. We checked with the water company. They were okay as long as the flows were maintained at that 135%. We checked with environmental. The original footprint of the property at phase 1 increases a little bit, but it's on the exact place where the phase 2 piece was going to go, so it was always planned for. It's a slight jut out to the northeast, I believe it is, but well within the footprint of what was anticipated. So that afforded us the opportunity to give an opinion of council to the selectmen, saying that each of the reports covers effectively phase 1A, I think is the way Scott refers to it, which I thought was critical because we basically told them that notwithstanding the economics, if that wasn't the case, then we had to slow the process down. Each of the consultants is here, the folks from Tig and Bond, the folks from Beals and Thomas, Tate and Howard, all signed off on it. As I said, David Condrey from the water company signed off on it. We talked to the HR&A associates who were the mitigation experts. They basically said that the only two that they couldn't cover by themselves were fire and police. We immediately contacted the chief. I went over and had both chiefs. I had a meeting with both of them, with Jerry, talked to them about, what's the experience been. They indicated to us what they'd done up in Foxwood and said that the requests they put in for the number of officers and other equipment were adequate because they kind of effectively covered that for part of Phase 2 already. So they did not need any extra firemen, they did not need any extra policemen, they didn't need any extra patrolmen. Chief asked us to put in a provision that made it clear that, should the number of service calls increase beyond what he expected based on, one, his experience, and two, the experience of what the information he got at Foxwood, that there would be, quote, a reopener. We got that in there. So I think every department head that we spoke to signed off on it, said they were fine. I think healthcare has asked for 2 additional inspectors. We're negotiating that position with Mr. Butera. He's pointed out that the city is going to get an application fee of $3.5 to $4 million, and doesn't that cover, the 10 additional restaurants that are going to be in town? So that's the only item we haven't come to full agreement on, which is within the context of a $32 million upfront payment, a $3.5 to $4 million application fee that they'd have to pay the town if and when they got the license, and the $31 million a year. It's a pretty small number. I think we're apart $25 grand on one other item, and that's about it. So we could probably have this agreement done, if the board so chose, by tomorrow night.
Can you, Sid or Jerry, could you talk to the areas in the document that are left blank, that we have at least? I know you've gone further and talked further, that need to be wrapped up before we could do that.
Sure. I'm going to have to turn to Kim to tell me which are the blanks. We had a provision in there that...
The yellow highlights, right?
The yellow highlights, right.
If I had a color version, that'd be lovely.
We had a provision on employees who weren't sure whether it was 3,500 or 3,250. That was blank at a point in time. Frankly, I don't remember which draft we sent you, but now we know it's 3,500 permanent employees, so that's in our current draft. There was a blank space at a point in time for the $20,000 a year that was ultimately negotiated for the Clafton Orchestra, the Milford Cultural Center, and a few other things of that sort in the town. So that was a blank space at one of the drafts. There was also a blank for whether any money was going to be given to the Chamber of Commerce. That was put in at $10,000 a year. I'm trying to think of what the other ones were.
There were a couple related to the program, weren't there? Some detail in the exhibits.
This is on the construction completion, which we're looking at.
Yeah, there's a construction completion date, which is the date by which they have to be done. Our guys are talking to Sean. We should have that resolved. I thought we were going to have it resolved today. I just haven't had a chance to talk to Sean Reardon and our consultant to find out what that is. But, we're just a matter of a couple of months apart as to when it has to be finished. So I should have that answer for you, if not tonight, certainly by tomorrow.
I'm sorry, Sid.
Construction completion date.
Okay. Excuse me. Let me just stop for a second. You need to wait for the chairman to recognize you, and we're not at a point where we might do that.
Those are the only blanks that we know of in the draft that you got. Those will be, fixed up, delivered, I would think by tomorrow night, Friday morning at the very latest. We'll obviously redline it to show you the few changes that are being made. They're very small. For instance, we put the wrong agency in for noise abatement. We thought it was MIPA. It turns out it's the highway something or another. I'm not enough of an engineer to know, but we discussed that. I've got to talk to Vonnie tonight to confirm that we've got that one right. There was the $25,000 disagreement on NWRTA. We thought that they'd agreed to 100. They thought they'd agreed to 75. I just spoke to Scott before we walked in. He said, if you tell me we agreed to 100, we'll stick by the 100. So that one got resolved. And I think that's about it. I mean, there were nominal changes that were really the fine-tuning of the document. And if we didn't have to fly home to Chicago first, you'd have it in the morning. So
Okay. because we know it's Kim's anniversary, so we
Right, right.
got to get her home.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
In the heat,
I took her to Five Brothers or Five Guys or
Five
whatever
Guys
it is
and
for
fries
dinner.
Awesome.
Next, I suppose that the best thing to do is quickly hear from the consultants that are present. People have made a great effort to come out here. They've done a lot of work over the weekend, and I'll let them go at the order that which Sid decides. Go one at a time until we've heard from each of the consultants.
Go. You want to tell us about traffic? Joe Balskus from Tig and Bond. Ty and
Good evening, Joe Balskus, Time Bond. We reviewed the traffic impact study with Tetra Tech, and we also reviewed the revised building program over the weekend, and we have no issue with the building program. All the improvements have been developed for both Phase 1 and Phase 2, so at this point in time, we have no issue with the program that's been revised for the project, so we're good.
Help us understand what no issue means. In other words, so there's been a change in the host community agreement, what you looked at before, and how that's reflected in that data, or what parts you had concerns about.
Excellent question, I'm sorry. The point I'm making is that we have no issue with, we don't need to change our conclusions from our previous reports and reviews. We didn't see need to go back and change any of our conclusions from the review that we did based on this revised building program. So when I say no issue, we have no further comments in terms of additional comments on the previous traffic improvements that have been proposed. So there's no change in our previous reports that we provided to the town.
So
I
I
think
realize that total hotel space will be less than what was originally proposed in a Phase 1, Phase 2. But there's additions in gambling or gaming seats, as the industry calls it. Can you help me through how that impacts and in what way? I'm guessing there's a different weighting factor.
Yeah, well, let me be clear. I mean, the traffic study that was done, all analysis that we've done with Tetra Tech was based on a full building program, not just Phase 1, but Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Right.
Larger building, the total building program. With these changes, we're not changing the total building program. Okay, we're not making any more changes, any greater size than we had before. So whether we do in Phase 2 or Phase 1, it doesn't change the extent of the traffic study that's been completed. It's just a matter of when they're doing it in terms of phases. We looked at it as a full build, Phase 1 and 2, as part of our analyses. So we didn't look at it Phase 1 and Phase 2. So it's the total package we looked at in terms of our traffic analysis. So that's why I'm saying there's no change in the conclusions that we've reached with Tetra Tech for the analysis.
Bill, maybe you can say-
But there is, let me ask it differently. There are changes. There are changes that may, in effect, have the number of traffic vehicle trips go down. So what I'm trying to figure out is the net effect of this report on traffic.
As I said, we looked at the total project, Phase 1 and Phase 2.
I understand.
Okay? We didn't look at a Phase 1 and then a Phase 2. So the changes in the Phase 1 and Phase 2 program don't affect the overall program that we looked at.
But it's different, right?
But my point is that it's not greater.
Smaller.
It's smaller. It's not, we're not looking at a greater program. So we didn't have to go back and revisit the impacts, the analyses to the intersection because we had more traffic. We actually had less traffic. So we didn't evaluate it. Is there less impact, less improvements needed? We didn't look at that. We basically looked at it in a total package of what is proposed with the project. If that makes sense, that's clear.
It does.
The point being is that the total casino size didn't get larger. Number of gaming positions didn't get larger. Hotel didn't get larger in terms of the total program. So we don't have more traffic with this change. If we did, I wouldn't be standing here saying that. We'd be looking at additional impacts because it's a larger program. It's basically a shift of the phases from Phase 2 to Phase 1 and how they're presenting it.
I understand. And I guess what I was trying to figure out is, while there may be a total 0.75 of the whole total Phase 1 and Phase 2, it may only be 75%. We may only realize a 10% reduction in traffic because the additional gaming seats and the reduction in hotel offsets and the waiting. I was just wondering to what extent you reviewed the traffic and to see whether it went down and by how much, and how much effect the gaming seats would have on the.
We did not. We did not look at that. If we had done an analysis, phase one impact analysis and phase two, we would have, but we looked at it together as one package. So with this latest change, we did not go back and look at it and see what are the impacts of that. We looked at the greater size of the project, and there was no change. There's no greater size in terms of the project, so there's no additional impacts. I hope
I'll
that's
go to
clear.
the members of the board, see if they have any questions. Dino? Okay. Brian? Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Jerry Prebbles, Beals and Thomas, Environmental and Stormwater.
Hi, Jerry Preble from Beals and Thomas. Yes, just anticipating some questions. What we looked at the last time, if you recall, we looked at essentially the location of the development with proximity to wetlands and as well as stormwater management and such. And we had some comments stating that obviously these needed to be validated with the later design. With this design that came in, it actually falls within the same exact footprint, aerial extent of what we looked at before. For example, phase one is the same phase one. There's as Sid had mentioned, there's a portion in the northeast section of this particular project that's expanded, but actually that was part of a phase two expansion to phase one that we looked at before. The other change is obviously the garage went from 6 stories to 8 stories, but the footprint remains the same. So essentially the impervious area, the location of the development with the proximity to wetlands is exactly the same. So with that being said, the recommendations, conclusions, opinions that we presented in the prior report that, different processes need to go through. They need to go before the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, State, and it needs to be validated, remain the same.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just first
Sure,
check
please,
to see
yeah.
if there's any questions. Any questions by the members of the board? No, not at this time. Okay. I'll say it again, and I want to say this from your report and the presentation that was made prior. I found that your report to be the most thorough, the Beals and Thomas report to be the most thorough, the most, I would say, challenging from the standpoint of questioning the process and questioning the environmental concerns and raising the most concerns for that, what is clearly an environmentally sensitive site. So I do want to give credit where it's due.
That.
I said it before, I'll say it again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Amanda Cavallari from Tata and Howard. Jack O'Connell couldn't make it today, so.
And you're also a Milford resident. I want to let everybody know.
Amanda Cavalieri with Tata and Howard. As I mentioned, we looked at wastewater generation estimates prepared by Tetra Tech. Amanda Cavalieri with Tata and Howard. I'm short, sorry. We reviewed the wastewater generation estimates prepared by Tetra Tech, and there was no significant change from the phase one and phase two that we originally reviewed, and everything is within the same scope and original information that we provided to the board. I apologize. When we reviewed the original wastewater generation estimates, they are still in the same range within what we had looked at beforehand. So we see no significant impacts or changes to what we originally reviewed.
Is the INI at $1.5 million still the same?
$1.5 million?
I mean, million gallons.
Yes, we still have the 5-to-1 II removal rate. That's part of the sewer rules and regulations.
So what's the target INI that needs to be mitigated?
We're still within the same range that we looked at prior to, which was, original estimate was around 290,000 for original flows. We're looking at 5 times that for removal rates. So roughly around 1.5 million gallons.
So with the reduction in, and I apologize if I'm loud, I know we're going from one low mic to a high mic. With the reduction in total hotel rooms, where did the additional water get consumed? If it's roughly equivalent, I'm just, help a layman who doesn't deal with hydraulics a lot. Help me understand why the water usage is the same.
It's roughly the same. It's a little less than what we originally looked at. We'd have to look a little closer as far as flows where the full reduction came from. But everything is within the range of Phase 1 and Phase 2. Does that answer your question?
Bill, I might be able to help here.
Yeah, please, thanks.
The original flow was 290,000 for Phase 1 and 2 together. The new flow is 257,000 for just this expanded phase. So what you're seeing is obviously a roughly proportionate reduction as a result of increased hotel rooms, but less than there was before, and a few other places where, because of Phase 2, it's slightly smaller than Phase 2 was, i.e. 290 down to 257.
Okay. That's helpful to me because that's an area of concern, and any reduction that we're talking about in terms of water and resulting wastewater would be significant. Still significant on our reserves, but less significant than the first Phase 1, Phase 2 proposal.
And the reason Kim said, oh, God, is because she couldn't find the memo. It
Yeah.
wasn't the question, it was, where's the memo?
I couldn't find it. I'm like, wait, we don't know.
All right, so it's less and therefore less discharge, and we're talking about roughly the same, so we're probably looking at less mitigation. We recently received a memo that came from the sewer department that asked for some clarification in language. Can we say that that language made it into this
Yes.
recent draft?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we can, there are department heads that are here, so if we need to, we can also call upon them. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And as I said before, Bill, the HR&A Associates said that the only two people they hadn't reached were the two chiefs. They're both here if you'd like to hear from them independently, but after our meetings, they said they had no further changes. I'm sorry, I just forgot. Got to go over water, too.
Yes.
David, would you mind, excuse me? I apologize.
ready.
I apologize.
My name is Dave Gonsalves with Time Bond. Time Bond helped evaluate the water demand for the project. What we did with the revised information, we took a look at the revised program and the water demand. As you recall, phases 1 and 2 were 273,000 gallons per day as the average day demand. The revised demand is approximately 250,000, just shy of 250,000 gallons per day, so it's actually less. But it may go up if we have a lot of these events here. Okay. So we're looking at 250,000 gallons per day. That's the way we looked at it. But the way that the exhibit is for water in the host community agreement doesn't specify an actual number. It's the 135% that we've discussed in the past. So in the event that there is future modifications to the program, there is provisions to allow the town of Milford and the Milford Water Company the ability to evaluate the number to ensure that they're comfortable with whatever number is developed. We did take a look at this in comparison to Mass Title V and other evaluations, and it falls within the range that we would expect for the revised program.
Okay. Any questions from the board members?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. While we have the chiefs here, why don't we hear from the chiefs? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. John doesn't have a gun, you can go first.
Turn that around, please, to the audience.
Oh, certainly. Sid came and met with me the end of last week. We took a, sorry?
Difficult to hear, Tom.
I apologize. No one's
First time
ever
you've ever
called me
heard that.
quiet, but that's, thank you. Sid came and met with me at the police station. We went over the changes. As others had done, we took a look at or I took a look at the overall program. I looked at our calls for service in that area of town, meaning the two sectors on that end of town. We also took a look at all of the calls for service, a much larger facility located in Connecticut, Foxwoods. And then we extrapolated from that actual crime statistics, things that would be reported to the FBI on the UCR. So in developing the coverage for police resources, that's the information we looked at. The changes that they presented to us don't necessarily change how we would patrol that area. The whole gist of having 2 police officers patrolling in that sector, where in others we have 1, was simply once you start going up over, 3rd floor, it's a 2-person call. So the change, adding 2 floors, didn't change how we would respond to a call. I did ask Sid if, on the town's behalf, if they would present where we could actually take a look at calls for service, as well as investigations on an annual basis. And if they go up a percentage, that the town has the ability to say to the developer, you have to provide us with additional resources, and that was agreed to. It's in the agreement. I read it today. So I'm comfortable with the position where we are.
All right, Chief, and one of the things I wanted to ask, because it's been speculation, and I've had different people ask it, so I don't think we're communicating it well. Can you go over for me what it was in terms of FTE, full-time equivalency, and what was put into those numbers in terms of your assessment and their needs to make sure that we had a fully burdened employee there with the full financial cost?
Once we reach the point where the conclusion that it's a 2-officer sector, patrol sector, it takes 3 police officers to staff 2, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week or 365 days a year. So it takes 3 police officers on each tour of duty, the 3 tours of duty, days, early evenings, and overnight, in order to have 2 on it. So once we determined that staffing for police officers, we then looked at dispatchers. Again, it takes 3 to have 2, so we wanted to add a dispatcher to each tour of duty. That leads us to 4.5. So we built into the program to hire the 4 police dispatchers, and then we added on an overtime rate the half position. So we will fill those shifts on an overtime basis. In developing the mitigation, we took a look at all of the factors. So equipment that the officers wear that's assigned to them, the equipment that they use in the field, so vehicles and things of that kind. So we fully outfitted 2 vehicles. We fully outfitted 9 police officers and 4 dispatchers. And then we took into account all of the things that we budget. So overtime, training money, money to the contributions to retirement, health care. So we went right down the list. Working with Zach, we were able to develop those amounts and provide them to council.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to bring that up because I don't know that we did a great job in making that clear. Any of the full-time equivalent employees that we've talked about, we've run the same model. It comes out of Zach from the accounting office. So it is the town accountant. And what he did is he made sure the same formula was applied to each of the employees that we looked at as being needed in order to service the casino and the resulting impact of a casino. So when we talk about a fully burdened employee, we're talking about, as the chief said, health care, what equipment they need, in their case, a vehicle, any training. It's not straight salary. I'm sorry, Chief, I've had you stay there, but I wanted to hit that point because it's the first time I've seen it in a while. The only thing, I think, the only observation and it was made by the FinCom, by the way, of a miss, was OPEB. And OPEB is other post-employment benefits. So, and I don't know whether that came up during any discussions, but it was our miss. It wasn't Foxwood's miss. It was our miss when we were calculating all the numbers.
But clearly, we're recovering more than we would, for instance, under a federal grant, when I receive grants.
Sure.
As far as benefits.
Sure.
Because benefits, we use the flat number of 28% in grant applications. So it does not cover retirement and things of that kind. So there's greater recovery in the formula that we developed in working with council. And the other change that's in there, Mr. Chairman, is that came up was future cost of living adjustments. How are they applied? And they did negotiate and get in there that it's going to be based upon the collective bargaining agreements.
So the actual and reasonable contracts? Right. Okay. All right. I thought that was important to note, and I didn't want to take the discussion into the weeds as much as it's come up a few times. I've been asked it publicly, and I wanted to make sure people understood the formula that we applied to it, and how much of that was forward-looking. And, okay. Chief Toohey? Good evening.
Good evening. Similar to the police chief, I met with town council and Sid and the staff in regards to the modifications to the plan as it was presented. When we looked at it from the fire department's perspective, we had looked at it from almost the phase 2 program, if you will. We still had a number of items that were on the table for negotiations. So when we came to this last meeting, my point was to solidify those and to get those into the program, because those were determined to be necessary for us to adequately serve the program. Those that have been accomplished, they're part of the document as it exists today. We're comfortable with that. I think we have with this program, we have the assets necessary to service the community and the casino.
John, what was the one, I think there was one asset that you were looking for that remained open throughout the process that's now closed? Do we?
Everything is closed at this point. We have the new ladder truck is part of the program. That was the largest stumbling block that was left for the negotiations. That's been wrapped up. It's part of the document at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Okay. Anybody else?
That's it.
Okay. You know, I noticed that some department heads and boards are here. They came here with taking the opportunity to see what was presented and to hear from the consultants as well. What I want to do is give department heads and board heads, or board members, the opportunity to ask any questions or make any comments if they have any at this time. Is there anybody here? I noticed there are FinCom members, Sewer Board. Appreciate your attendance. Town engineer. If there are none, I'll go to the board members now and take their comments.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Sorry. One of the most important aspects, as you just mentioned, is our town officials, the police chief, fire chief, sewer commissioners, the sewer superintendent, and town engineer Vonnie Reese, working very closely with Mike Santora. And Vonnie, if you could just wrap up, I know we've spoken probably about 10 times since last Wednesday, if you can just give a general consensus of the town officials as far as your comfort level on the changes that were made over the past week, I think that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Dino. I'm Vonnie Reese. I'm the town engineer, and I have worked very closely with Sid and Kim, with Rick, of course, and with Jerry on this whole process. When things changed last week, they changed very quickly, and so I immediately started talking with the other department heads at Town Hall and the other consultants that we've been working with all along through this process. And our initial conclusions were, well, for most of the important engineering issues like traffic, water, and sewer, we had looked at both phases, so the full build-out. And this proposed program is a smaller program than the full build-out. So the mitigation that we've asked for is actually, it's actually of the right magnitude, or it's actually more than what we'll need. And so we were pleased with that. I did get a lot of feedback from the other department heads in the town hall, and at this point, everyone has had a chance to review their part of the document at least, and I feel fairly confident that their concerns were heard and that their issues were addressed.
Bonnie, could you do me a favor and hit briefly on in addition to police, fire, and school, the other mitigation that we're talking about?
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Some of the other mitigation from some of the other departments, for example, the library has asked for a small stipend to update their internet services. That has not changed. They are aware of the change in the program, and they're happy with what has been agreed upon. The Board of Health has asked for additional health inspectors because of the additional workload, and I believe that has been negotiated, and that the Board of Health is happy with what has been negotiated. Like I said, the water, the sewer, and the traffic were all over-designed for that higher phase 2. And stormwater issues were something that I had looked at very carefully, and I'm very pleased with how the document is written with respect to stormwater issues.
Did we talk about inspections?
That would be the Board of Health, Department of Inspections.
So you've combined Board of Health and inspections?
Yes, in fact, they are two separate departments, and they are two separate requests. So there will be an additional staffing needs during the construction period from the building department to make sure everything is up to code, make sure that the construction is done properly. And then going forward, while the resort is in operation, we'll need additional health inspectors for the restaurants and the hotels.
Okay, hold on just a second. Any questions? No. Okay, right? No. Okay. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Rick, was Zach Taylor town accountant able to get us any different additional information on general state aid impact? We've talked a lot, for the benefit of everybody who's not intimate with every aspect of the state aid formulas, we've talked a lot about Chapter 70 and the specific impact of the school. What I'm trying to understand and what I've asked the town accountant to look at is what the general impact to state aid, roads, general government, and whether that's significant or insignificant number. I'm just trying to get order of magnitude here.
Zach, number one, was away, so he hasn't looked at that. He felt that the general government would be minimal, and I think, and I'm going to have to defer to Jerry here, and Sid, I think they did do some calculations on that, so I will defer to them.
On the school aid, it's a very precise formula. One part of it's very simple, as you well know, Bill. It's the increased in assessed value for the town. So that's a fairly simple one to come up with, because the casino is going to be valued at X, 25 million bucks. This is what happens. Part of the formula that, according to the folks at the Commonwealth, is difficult, and the two sets of consultants that we both went out and spoke to, is how you calculate the other main portion of the formula, which is the income portion, the increase in income in the town of Milford as a result of the casino. The values we get, so on the real estate side, it's $1.8 million. It's viewed as, if it kicks in fully, all things being equal, the formula being the same, it'd be $1.8 million that would be lost in school aid. First, let me say that in the agreement, there is no number. Whatever the loss is, that's what the deal is. But currently, it's $1.8 million. The income number, 3 different guys.
When you say currently, you mean with the last proposal?
Yeah, with this proposal, yes, the Phase 1A proposal. Okay, it's $1.8 million. We have 3 different people who gave us numbers. Mr. Hatch, the prior Mr. Hatch, whatever his name was, that had the job before Hatch did, and one guy that we spoke to, and the numbers ranged from a low of, income-wise, about $500,000 to a high of, it would be $900,000. So what we did in the agreement is we provided that for whatever it is, that's the deal. So we didn't provide a number because, you know, the formula could change, things could change, so we provided instead a mechanism that says whatever that result is, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, whatever the number is, that's what they owe the town.
That's as it relates to Chapter 70?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we looked at the others, and the conclusions we were given is that marginal impact, if any, is what they came up with on roads. You know, that laundry list of 4 or 5 other items, they said if it amounted to $100,000, they'd be surprised. So.
Okay, so that helps me, to be honest with you, it helps me with order of magnitude. Okay.
If I could. And all these things were talked about amongst ourselves and with Foxwoods. And a lot of the things beyond the certainty of the police, the fire, the schools, the amount for general government, general mitigation, as you know, was increased in this from 200,000, I think it was per year, prior to 240,000. That's in part consideration of these other items. And then, again, from Foxwoods' perspective, too, was that the impact money, and the initial money was going from 15 million to 30 million. So that increase to the 30 million, the increase to the amount that was going to be theoretically for general government purposes, not to even mention the increase in the taxes, everybody sort of viewed that as that's covering all of these other peripheral things beyond the police, the fire, and the schools for certainties. And again, in terms of inspections, increases, any requirements aren't going to kick in until the building permit's applied for, and that's going to have a fee. Well, I think the fee's about $5 million building permit fee, not $3 million, as Sid mentioned. So all of those numbers together, more than by a huge magnitude, cover those items, and that's the way we handle them in the negotiations.
Yeah, and what I was really looking for is experts' best guess at the number, and just give us bigger than a bread box, smaller than a Volkswagen type. Okay. So I want to go back to, I don't.
Dina was talking.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dean.
Go ahead, that's all right, I can wait. Go ahead.
No, I didn't have anything profound to say anyway.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, do you want some comments now or later or what?
Well, let me say this. Trying to satisfy audience members, trying to satisfy the members of the board, trying to make sure that our visitors have not wasted their time coming out. I'm trying to hit everybody here that needed an opportunity to speak, to talk about the impact and the new plan. So I'm going to guess now's as good a time. Yeah.
We've had, all the right people speak, and it's important for the residents and us. I know David Condrey is here, and he did come, as you've said, and he's in charge of the water company and all that. It'd be good to get his perspective on what we're trying to do here tonight.
Yes, Dave Condrey, manager of the water company. From the beginning, we've been working very closely with Vonnie and the rest of the engineers and the consultants on the project. And right from the very beginning, we wanted to look at Phase 2 or the complete build-out, not Phase 1 and then Phase 2. So from the outset, we always had it in mind that we wanted to know what that ultimate maximum amount of water that you think you're going to be needing on an annual or on a daily average. And again, that original number was, I think, 270-something thousand gallons a day. With this change in the proposal, it's down to about 253,000 gallons a day. Again, based on what we had and how we had the numbers run, we feel comfortable with the change, only because it is slightly less than what that full build-out for Phase 2 would have been. Again, with the agreement as it is written, no matter what that number happens to be, when they finally get everything designed and spec'd out, the big number here is that they have to prove, we have to have shown that they have 135% of what that number is. So they need to come up with their number plus 35% more of a needed flow with the improvements on the wells. So again, what that number happens to be, they have to show at least 135% of that. So again, with the agreement the way it's shown, and they can't move forward without that proof. So we're very comfortable with the way it's been written and the protection of our current residents and any projects that are currently on the books for the community already.
Any questions?
Thank you.
David, just one question. I think you covered it, but we had talked about the difference between theoretical modeling and absolute empirical. So I think you said that they couldn't move forward in terms of occupancy unless we were able to yield that amount from the existing wells. That's helpful. But I want to see if I understand this right. If the wells were to yield more, do they get more?
No, it's not so much that they get more, it's whatever that number happens to be. Say it's that 253,000 gallons a day. That's what they'll be given on a daily basis. But in order for them to move forward, they have to give us that extra 35%, which would in turn go back into the community, if you will.
Are we at a point, well, let me say it this way. If the wells don't yield, that would we need to increase our permitting, our ability, our existing permit with the state? Would you have to?
No, if the permit, the Water Management Act permit right now, as it's written, covers that additional flow because as over time periods, the ability for the certain well fields to meet what their permitted volumes are has declined. So we are actually at we're not producing the amount of water in those well fields that we're permitted for currently.
Okay, and what we don't know yet is whether they're capable of the permitted amount.
That's correct. That's always that issue.
All right, very good. Thank you. I'm sorry, Brian, did you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Thank you, David. Okay, next I'll go to comments from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think from the very beginning, and it's been a long process. Actually, we started talking about it 3 or 4 years ago, and I never thought we would be to this point. But one of the main goals and priorities that I always have is that it would be done Milford way, and I think it has been done Milford way. I think it's been an open process. All the studies, all the vetting, all the discussions that we've had, to me, and I won't really touch about the money because the money is self-explanatory. Anybody who can read this thing, once every every household receives this document, it'll be totally understood. The mitigation of the major issues, and I think we've all talked about the major issues, and one of the major issues was the water. The acceptance by our town officials, the protection for the neighbors affected, all the streets, 16, 109, Wildwood, and I tell you, that process worked out good, and that's the way it had to be. We've had some very good discussions, very professional. I've probably received about 7 or 8 letters at home, pretty nasty, but that's the price of doing business sometimes, and that's the minority. But as far as the major discussions that we've had, very professional, and all of you have conducted yourselves like Milford people, like we always do things, and I think it's worked out for the best. And that was a major process that had to happen, and hopefully it'll continue if it goes forward. To me, the job's most important. You know, I have to say it, is that, you know, there are a lot of people in our families who are out of work, and to me, if you're able to get a job, $40,000, $45,000 with benefits, and a half a mile from home, that's damn pretty good. And if I were work with a couple of kids, I would certainly look at that very favorably. The local hires, the boards will do the best we can, the best efforts, language. We can't have quotas, but we can certainly do other things to make sure that we have local hires. From Milford, veterans, people with disabilities. It'll be fully ADA compliant, so anybody in a wheelchair, anybody with a major disability can go in and participate just like every other normal citizen. The recommendations from all the meetings that we've had, and we've had many, many meetings, I think most of those have been incorporated, and if we couldn't put it in, it's because we just couldn't do it. But I think all the recommendations, and when town council talked about the agreement and all the major aspects, it's certainly, all the protections are in there. As far as the values going down, we have a fund in case people sell their homes in that area after 7, 8 years. We talked about school aid. What happens if school aid goes down? We have the protections to make that up. The reopener clauses. Loss of Chapter 70. All the other legal entities that were talked about by town council and our attorneys. I think one of the, and like I said, I won't talk about the money because you'll see what the money is, and then, you know, people can make their own decision later on. We had a lot of hearings at the high school, and I tell you, the residents, what you said, the comments, it certainly hit me at home. You know, we've had some disagreements in a professional, civil way, and that's okay. But I remember one of the gentlemen who got up, I think it may have been the last meeting. Do you remember he talked about his wife being sick and his daughter was sick with cancer or something? And he said, you know, you're taking care of everybody, but what about the average person? What are you going to do for that person? Paying the bills, taxes, and all that. And I think we all agree, and we'll certainly make it work, that if this thing goes forward, that if we have an opportunity, that the average taxpayer in Milford will receive a significant reduction in his or her taxes. And I think that's important, because that's important to me and important to a lot of people. So we have all kinds of consultants. We have all kinds of advisors. Matter of fact, it looks like Washington sometimes. But at the end of the day, as one selectman, I have to make the decision. And in my opinion, I think this is a good thing for the town of Milford. And I think what we wanted was a document that would be ironclad and would touch upon all the principles and all the recommendations and all the ideas that are important for the town of Milford. And in my opinion, I think we've done that. And Mr. Chairman, tonight, if you allow me, I will make a motion that we, not tonight, but, one second. I'd like to make a motion that at the right time, that the motion to proceed with the host community agreement and request town council and attorneys Shefsky and Froelich to prepare a clear and comprehensive final document for acceptance for this board on Monday night. There have been a few things that have added. We talked about a couple of things that the chairman brought up. Those things will certainly be included in the final document. But I think we, as far as I'm concerned, I'm ready to proceed. I think the people of Milford, most of the people talk to me. You have two people on either side, for it, against it, but the majority of people are telling me, I want to see the document, I want to see what it does for the people of Milford, the protection of the areas, like I said, the revenue and all that, people can see that for themselves, and then I want to be able to vote on the matter. So that's my opinion. after having gone through this process for the past 6 months and really talking about these issues for the past 2 or 3 years on an informal basis with all the town officials that we had in town. And so I, for one, am very satisfied. As a person who lives here, my family lives here, my neighbors, my friends, I am very confident that this is something that the town of Milford should really look at, and I'm sure there'll be more meetings that will be conducted by this board in preparation for the referendum, and then after that, let's see what happens. But that would be my preference, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you. Oh, this is the loud microphone. Gotta be careful with this baby, it's strong. Thank you for allowing me to comment. I too see this process as coming to a close, and it has been going on for quite some time, as all of us know. As I look through this host agreement that's proposed, first, I have to commend our town council, who really is a general attorney, but helped quarterback the coordination of many different entities to come forward with a very strong agreement from a legal sense. And also the firm of Shefsley and Freilich, or as we know them, Sid and Kim, because there's no question that their expertise was invaluable in this process, along with the level of work that they put in. As an attorney, you know, I obviously get to draft agreements, but nothing as comprehensive as this. And I can really admire the work that was done, and I think you did a great job for the town of Milford in putting together this document, and I really appreciate that. Some of the things in it, well, let me just say, more or less all of it has been summarized before you. Many of these details, all of us have had a chance to work with council, convey our thoughts, and have input. The one item that I think is gratifying to me is the Residents' Impact Fund, because I think about the genesis of that clause, and it was when all three of us were at Zane Circle talking to the homeowners and listening to the concerns that they had about loss in property value. And it was a thought that came to me that, you know, there's going to be enough money here that we can fashion a fund to satisfy those concerns and assure the people who, you know, could be affected the most by this development that they won't lose value on their property. And from that conversation, it went through town council, through Sid and Kim, through the negotiation process, and that's a real benefit that folks who live in that immediate area conveyed as a real concern. And this process, to me, I think, has been great. And it's been great because so many people in the town of Milford have come forward and gotten interested. Lots of the people that have given thought and comment on this, I've never seen before. And I've lived here my entire life. I've been involved in government since 1989. Many of these people I've never seen at any meetings. Issues that have confronted the town, just as important. I've never heard them, but this issue has gotten people involved on both sides, whether they're for it or against it. And my position really as a selectman, as a public servant, was always to try to flesh out, I think, the strongest proposal so that you, the townspeople, have a choice. That's what it's all about. It's not Brian Murray saying this is good, or saying this is bad, or saying you should do it or should not do it. It's me saying, I've done the best I can to provide you the opportunity to now decide whether or not this is something that you want for your town. That's all I can do. And I think all of us worked very hard to do that. It was very difficult, I think, to keep your eye on the ball because there were so many peripheral interferences that could clearly detract your attention from that. But I think, at least from my perspective, I've done that. And, you know, I know Dino said he's only gotten 7 or 8 nasty letters, so I think my email's working better than his, because I got a heck of a lot more than that. But, you know, that's fine. That's good. And I didn't answer all of them, but I read every one of them. And a lot of the thoughts that were conveyed, good or bad, I conveyed on to council, to the negotiating team. And I think some of the folks that have concerns, you know, you'll see that these items are in there. And that's the level of participation that I think is so great to see, because apathy, I think, is taking over not only this community, but really the country, but not on this issue. So as this process is coming to a close, and by the way, I will second Dean's motion, I think that this is as strong as an agreement as we can come up with. Some of the details need to be filled in, but I'm ready to sign it, and not to sign it to say that this is something that you ought to do, but to sign it to say, now you have a choice. Do you want to take advantage of this economic opportunity? There are people in the community, and I know them, you know, through my practice, you know, they don't have jobs. They're struggling to pay the rent. They're losing their homes. So when an economic opportunity like this presents itself to the community, I owe it to those people to give them the choice to decide whether or not they want to try to take advantage of those jobs. And that's how I viewed the position, and that's what I've tried to do throughout this process. I think there are some great benefits in here to the town. If you look at what could alternatively be built on this property as a matter of right and compared it with this project, it's night and day. If an office park came in, they're not going to do the improvements to 495. They're not going to upgrade the water that's going to benefit the entire town. They're not going to provide the sewer that's going to run right to Holliston. They're not going to do any of the types of things that this agreement provides to the town of Milford, and they're certainly going to have a much more damaging ecological and environmental footprint. So I think the positives are there, and to those folks that find negatives there, we've done the best we could, I think, to try to mitigate those negatives and make it the best opportunity for the town of Milford. And as I look forward to the next step in this process, I'm very excited and anxious to see the townspeople react, and the folks who think it's a good idea come out and advocate for it, and the folks who don't think it's such a good idea come out and advocate against it, because that's what it's all about. If we don't have citizen participation, we cease to exist in the type of government that this country has known for so many years. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for allowing my comments, and I will turn back the microphone to you. And maybe, you know, if this project does go through, maybe we can find it in the budget to have a separate microphone for all of us.
So I, too, think it's time for a vote. I think it's time for this board to decide, make a decision. My only concern that I have is, maybe different than the other members of the board, I received this document, or this stack of documents, yesterday. And I most certainly was not able to go through all the changes that the attorneys worked through. I appreciate the highlights, and I would echo the comments of my colleagues about what a great job that's been done in the past week to put this together. I think I owe them the respect to have read through that, all 1,000-something changes that have occurred in the document. And, you know, I've got to admit, I have a job, I work for somebody else, so today was a loss with respect to the community and my ability to read that document. Last night I had some unproductive time between midnight and 5 a.m. Where I wasn't able to read it as well. I just have not had the time to go through this document thoroughly. That's a shame. I think we may be rushing this. I think the benefit, I think we're unnecessarily rushing it because I don't think the benefit gained of a vote tonight is all that significant from a vote possibly Monday. But I think I'm sitting with speed readers because there's just no way I was able to get through that document. And congratulations to anybody who was able to, or documents, I should say. So with that said, I don't have any issue. We have a valid motion. We have a second. There's clearly going to be a vote tonight. Here's what I have from the limited reading I have. I'm not sure the mitigation dollars for the residents are sufficient. No, let me be more clear. They're insufficient. I don't care where it comes from, whether it comes from additional dollars from Foxwoods or we just slide the dollars from one place to another. We're talking about 300 homes and on average $8.6 thousand per home. I think the loss could be far greater. It's on a first-come, first-served basis, so I don't think the dollars are sufficient. Again, I don't care where the dollars come from. I think that fund needs to be funded greater. I think the time set at 5 years is insufficient. I think it's an arbitrary number. There's no reason to place it at 5 years. It could just as easily be 10. I think the local hire provisions are weak. The best efforts, I've heard the attorneys. I'm just not satisfied with those. We've talked about local aid. I would have also asked for language changes tonight to include just a change in the language, not the dollar value, with respect to dollars earmarked for any particular group, such as chamber or anybody else, that we just simply put it in an economic development fund for the community to decide, the Board of Selectmen and the town meeting. Because it does not have to be earmarked to any one group or any, we can do that in time. We have an IDC who redoes the charter every 10 years. They're perfectly capable of doing some of these things, and they need some dollars to do that. Now, those are the things that I can grasp in the short time that I've had an opportunity to look through this document. I had fully intended to review this document and come up with any other language changes. I think that our council would probably agree, and I think Foxwoods would agree, these are relatively minor language changes. But then again, I haven't had an opportunity to review the document. These are just some things that leap out at me. But we have a motion, we have a second. I'll now look to the board to vote. All those in favor? Aye. I vote against in the negative. Thank you. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
That's unanimous. The meeting is now ended. Thank you very much.